People whose NDAs have expired, what secret can you finally reveal? If you are ever with an elderly loved one and they get a Medicare call, hang up right away. I worked at a company in downtown Chicago this last year that were absolute slime balls. All of these young agents scamming old people, promising something about this new upgrade to their insurance, when really they were just taking them off their plan. A lot of these people have Alzheimer's disease, and we would get POAs calling in to say that we took their mother/father/aunt off a plan, and now they can't get back on it for an entire year. I finally quit because it was so horrific what we had to do to our elders to get a paycheck. I personally tried to do everything I could to not be slimy, but at the end of the day, the whole job was just screwed up. I took a man off his plan and was going to have him start a new one the following month. He didn't have his medication list on him, so he told me he would email it to me. He finally emails me a list of at least 20 medications. One of his medications that was covered for like $20 on his plan would go up thousands of dollars on the plan I would put him on. I called him back and spent 2 hours canceling what we had signed him up for. I still feel horrible to this day. Imagine if he forgot to send me that list of medication. Listen to me, as a past Medicare advisor, do not let your parents, grandparents take these calls. Medicare Advantage plans are screwed up, and Medicare advisors are 20-something-year-old kids who will do anything to get them taken off of their plan. Well, it's a pretty strong PSA to start out with, huh? Medical scams are probably some of the absolute lowest scams out there in the world. I hate it so much. Thanks for the public service, OP. Letting us know, not doing that job. That job is not a public service. Hey guys, we have a new channel where we go over very in-depth stories. Whether it's a Karen on the loose or a story about a mother's perspective on her husband throwing out their daughter's ashes. The link will be in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the new channel. Story 2. When I worked for state IT, we weren't supposed to provide details of what hardware was being used or operating systems. In the 90s, I took an old server, souped it up, and put Linux on it to run our networks. This was pretty radical at the time, because everyone else was using something proprietary, like NetWare, and I was able to deliver services for free, email and Samba, that they were paying out the nose for. The NDA wasn't about security. It was about keeping how much money they were wasting under wraps. Story 3. During my geology PhD, I visited the site of a proposed waste disposal site. A preliminary geographical survey identified a strange anomaly. A deep linear feature trending to the south-southwest. Looked like a buried river valley. The site needed investigating for an environmental impact statement/report. Part of the planning application. My access to the site and investigation included an NDA. I couldn't publish anything about it until after the rubbish dump was built, and a 5-year stay was put on my thesis. Access was restricted to only a few people. My PhD supervisor also thought the anomaly was an ancient buried river valley, perhaps a few million years old. This is exactly what the people who wanted to build the rubbish dump wanted to hear, as they could absolutely not put a rubbish dump over or near a karst feature. Dissolved limestone. Contamination could leak into the groundwater. We drilled into the center of the anomaly in 2003. We encountered peat and gravels, then 40 meters of clayey lake sediments, then some more gravels, but then we found 65 meters of hard clay. In fact, 2 layers of clay, 40 meters of orange clays, and 25 meters of white clay. We hit limestone bedrock at 128.32 meters depth, 33.3 meters below sea level. The hard clays were left behind after the limestone dissolved. It was karst, a type of karst called a pocket deposit. They were also found in the UK. The clays were used to make pipes, pipe clay, and cheap pottery. They were around 15 million years old, judging by the fossil pollen and leaves they found. By the time the stay ended, the rubbish dump was built close to the anomaly, where it absolutely should not be. Story 4. When a pharmacy's stock of medication expires, they can't just throw it away. So they hire pharmaceutical waste disposal companies to take it away and dispose of it properly. The pharmacy I worked for bought expired medication and supplies under the table from one of these disposal companies and resold them at full price. Edit. Naming and shaming would be complicated, because the business operated under a constantly changing chain of mail-order pharmacies. When insurance companies would get enough complaints about one, they would deny coverage, at which point patients would be shuffled to another pharmacy in the chain while the impacted pharmacy quietly closed and reopened under a new name. The good news? They were busted and folded pretty quickly under the weight of having to operate like an honest pharmacy. Company in question is no more. Story 5. I worked in the auto industry for a respected and highly ranked luxury brand. As a manager, we learned from corporate to teach the employees how to solicit a positive review, or, more importantly, how to dissuade a negative one. We were using tactics that are beyond immoral and borderline illegal. A personal favorite of mine was having to meet with a disgruntled customer, personally accept all of the blame for whatever shortcoming, real or imagined, and tell them that the negative review will only affect the low-level employee that was in their corner the whole time. Then offer them some freebies and excuse myself so the other employee could apologize. 99% of the time, the customer would take the employee's side and leave them a positive review. Occasionally, they called corporate to complain about me, which did absolutely nothing. They wanted those negative phone calls as long as the actual online/mailed review was positive. Additionally, we would call people in for a free oil change, tire rotation, free floor mats, etc., and replace parts that were suspected in auto acceleration faults. They were trying to fix as many cars as possible to avoid a recall and bad publicity. In that case, it still did become a big news story. The SUVs with a known defective engine that broke just outside of warranty did not become a news story. Seeing people brag about their amazing car based on ratings still makes me cringe. If you use ratings and reviews of vehicles to select a brand of car, don't. Most of them are skewed and exploited by certain manufacturers. Yeah, just being online in general, I've kind of learned to not trust reviews for anything. It's like that meme that you see, right? It's like, 4.9 stars out of 5 with a billion reviews, suspicious. But then, 4.2 stars? That's some good stuff. You know that one's gonna be quality. Story 6. Chase Bank Mortgage Division uses outdated technology it bought for hundreds of millions of dollars from Quicken/Rocket Mortgage. It's a DOS-based system that Quicken created around 20 years ago. They also purposely handicap their salespeople who work off commissions. To avoid paying out larger commissions if they're doing well, they will be pooled into receiving worse leads or put on special assignments that limit productivity. In worst-case scenarios, when a salesperson finds a way to break the system and make more money than Chase planned to pay out, they dig through the employees' chats or personal files to find reasons to terminate them. Chase also promotes internally to inflate their number of higher-level positions held by minorities. Sounds great on the surface, but they do so artificially. Typical positions are filled by recruiting/HR, but whenever they want to bump the numbers, they open a position that only inclusion candidates can apply for. Inclusion candidates are code for non-white or non-disabled. These positions are usually for low-level management that is planned to be cut in the near future. Oh, and they give a blatant preferential treatment to employees with children to avoid lawsuits. They lost a big one a few years back over fathers getting equal maternity leave time. Story 7. A new company took over a contract I worked on and sent everyone an email on Monday morning saying we had until Friday to accept a 20% pay cut or Friday would be our last day. I was a team lead. I'd been part of the committee that hired every person on my team. They asked if I was staying. I told them that I was, but it was a big pay cut, and I understood if they left and would be happy to write them a letter of recommendation. They all stayed. I was under an NDA that precluded me from telling them that there were about 5 out of the 50 of us that kept our previous pay rates. They obviously assumed that I was taking a pay cut with them by staying. I'm pretty sure that NDA wouldn't hold up in court, but I didn't know that at the time. It felt sleazy as hell to treat my guys that way. Story 8. Electronic Arts is a horrible company that treats contracted workers like slaves and forces them into a cutthroat environment where yellow badges, contractors are promised blue badges, full employees based on quality of work. But blue badges run teams of yellow badges and take credit for the whole team's work. Worked as a QA tester on Sims 4, and I can't tell you the amount of times I was told to not submit a report, only to see the same issue I had found submitted with my team lead as the source. I made $8.50 an hour and worked Monday to Saturday. Meanwhile, team leads worked Monday to Friday, made double, and were offered health benefits, retirement, and PTO. BS system, and I'm glad I got fired over a BS harassment claim. Girl who sat next to me filed the claim and said that I creeped her out, despite the fact that I had never said more than good morning and see you tomorrow to her. Like I said, cutthroat environment. Last I heard, she was made a team lead shortly after I left. I feel like this is a good example that competitive environments and workplaces aren't always good. Sometimes they can kick people off their butts and make them do some really good work. Other times, they make people use underhanded tactics that ruin the entire work environment. It's a careful balance, I think. Story 9. I boxed up the first batch of Nokia Lumia smartphones. They were delivered in a blacked out van with a convoy. All the work our company did was supervised by armed guards. I was part of the crew that sent out letters to BP stockholders when the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico happened. The pages were printed with a very interesting method that imprinted the text onto the page, but left the rest of the toner semi-bonded. So the page came out completely black off the printer, straight into an envelope with a special label that was printed out similarly. They were collected by a different blacked-out van. I saw all of the specs and diagrams in 2010 for the 2014 release of the Land Rover Discover and Range Rover Sport, including detailed engine breakdowns. I still have the book somewhere, as well as like 5 or 6 4-gig USB brackets that were packaged with them. I can't remember the name of the gallery, but there was a fun set of prints, and only like 100 or so were sold. The one that sticks with me was a lady lying naked with what looked like bolognese on her, topped with a raw egg. The print sets sold for like 10,000 pounds a pop, and I had a set just chilling in a box. Something like 3,000 sets were printed and only the best ones went out. Working for a printing company was pretty good sometimes. I've never considered the fact that printing companies do get to hear a lot of stuff before it happens, or before it goes public. Because yeah, they're the ones who print it out. Makes sense that they would have to sign a lot of NDAs and stuff. That could ruin a lot of secret projects. Story 11. That Facebook is every bit as horrible as people think it is. What struck me most is the culture of silence there. You cannot openly talk about concerns of the effects of Facebook as an engineer without vague references of it showing up in your performance reviews. Perhaps people have a more comic book style evil corporation in mind, but Facebook coercion happens with performance reviews, strict metrics chasings, and not talking about the broader implications of those metrics. Take, for example, chasing the average session length metric. In effect, how long you're likely to stay on Facebook at any given time. It seems innocuous at first, until you realize that this is where radicalization and spread of misinformation happens. Because as it happens, what keeps people's attentions the most effectively is sensational posts and polarizing posts, targeting people's outrage. Not only does this give you a skewed view of the world, but it rewards the people spreading misinformation and rage bait. It's not that Facebook inherently plans to maximize people's outrage, it's just that their metrics chasing makes them the most money by finding these patterns. Then, like I said, it's awfully convenient to just stay silent and count the cash. It's the pinnacle, in my experience, of the banality of evil. Story 12. What really happened at Minot in 2007. Regarding 6 temporarily lost nuclear weapons. But that's the only area my NDA has lapsed. Former 2W2 who worked for the 5th Bomb Wing and 91st Space Wing. I was not in the BW at the time as I was in the W78 program, but basically the report is out now and thus my NDA lapses there. I recall hearing the news that followed. The unbelievable chain of custody failures could have been stopped at several different points. But at many of the points, laziness took over. There is a certain method for visually determining what you have loaded in the pylon, and person after person after person basically said, "Nah, we're good." The following crews missed it. AGM maintenance crew, breakout crew, transport crew, munitions control, my former post, pilot navigator, and flight officers. This was a monumental screw-up, up and down the board. We literally lost our certification status, the entire wing, all of us. Barksdale's 2W2s had to fly in immediately and literally do our jobs for us for some time. Now, what happened afterwards is still protected. But this was a very bad moment that in other circumstances could have been accepted as an act of war. Edit. Okay, it was pointed out that the jargon wasn't very clear. Very simply, 6 nuclear weapons we temporarily lost and unsecured. When you have a live warhead, you must secure it in specific ways. Also, to determine if you have a live warhead, you look in specific areas. Those specifics are still a matter of classification, hence why I'm not detailing those. Basically, all the crews, from the people who open up the vaults, to ground transport, to flight crews, didn't check to see if it was live or training. After it was discovered, the entire squadron lost certification status, meaning we weren't even allowed to work on our own weapons. I was gonna say something about the jargon. I'm like, I don't understand what half of this means, but I think I get the idea. The TLDR was incredibly helpful here. Seriously though, that's horrifying. That is truly, truly scary. At any point, one of those could go off and level an entire huge area where people probably live. That's bad. That's not very good. Story 13. 99% of the time when you go to a car dealership's website and click the box to chat with a representative, you're actually talking to a person in an office nowhere near the dealership. Almost everything you ask already has a canned response for it. Where I worked, our entire job was to get your contact info to send to the dealership so they could contact you on their own time. Even if you asked a simple question like, "What's the mileage on this truck?" we had to say something like, "I'm having trouble getting that information. Let me get your phone number and email address and I'll have a salesperson get back to you with the information." I got fired from there because because I refused to engage with the scumminess. If someone asked a question and I knew or could find the answer, I would just tell them. Sometimes people just want to browse and don't want to be hounded by a salesperson to buy an overpriced POS car. I'd say the company I worked for, but last I checked, the boss I had there used Reddit. Story 14. This is probably not going to surprise anyone, but I have worked and still do in advertising. I am still limited to how much I can reveal, and I will not be naming any names. Around early 2010s, we were developing technology focused on hyper-localization. We already had access to a plethora of devices because we had personally developed mobile apps for some very big and household name companies. And we also had our SDK in millions of devices via other apps. We tested out our tech in Vegas on the Strip. We wanted to see if we can easily communicate with the devices without raising any alarms for the users or the app developer, assuming we did not want to share the tech with them. We were able to do so with ease, as we tested by sending them push notifications. As you can tell, none of this involved permissions from anyone involved. Our goal was to localize customers to the portion of the aisle that they were in. So if they're in aisle 7 of Ralph's, we know that the middle of the aisle is selling cereal. So we will immediately send a notification on some cereal sale. We find this very creepy right now because the average customer has become wary of being monitored. But of course, to us or any advertiser, the user is just a number. Nobody is ever interested in finding out your deep, dark secrets. Before they could go much further with this tech, I left the company for a better opportunity. I don't know what they're doing now, but they're still in business and have expanded. I don't know about you guys, but if that happened to me, I would be more freaked out than anything and would be disincentivized. I would want to buy it less, is what I'm saying. Just because I don't like the idea that my phone knows exactly where I am, even though obviously that's going to be the case a lot of the time. Story 15. Remember that giant robot fight between the US and Japan? The US team, Megabots, spent 2+ years and $2.5 million prepping for a real fight. Once our 2 robots arrived in Japan, we were informed we now had to stage the fight, or otherwise they had found some loophole that would have allowed them to pull out / not allow us to use images of them. We immediately found out why. Their robot looked great, but essentially was foam covered in sheet metal. So due to pride, we weren't able to actually fight as it would have been a bloodbath. One of the Megabots founders put up a video explaining exactly what went down on our YouTube channel once NDAs expired. The company folded anyway, and the lackluster duel was the main reason for that. Do you know how hard it was to see the response from communities like this one when everyone on the Megabots team also felt duped? We know we let you down and couldn't do a damned thing about it, outside of trying to fight our 2 robots against each other in a real fight, which ended up being pretty badass. Glad we got to do that at least once before it all came crashing down. Story 16. Home Depot's cabinet makeover program is overpriced, and chances are you will be out of contract when you need something fixed. I had a customer get his countertop replaced, and he was without a countertop for 5 weeks. An 80-year-old man. The service team told him, "You look pretty handy," and to rig up some plywood to use. I had a customer get the wrong top installed and my sales manager didn't care. If you are a sales rep, you get a company car, so you can drive 2 hours to your 8 a.m. appointment, and an iPad so you can type up corporate busy work reports about appointments and answer angry emails and phone calls from customers after you get home at 10 p.m. Story 17. I worked for Heartland Dental. You have probably been to a Heartland Dental office, but you wouldn't know it, because all of their offices have different names, like Montvale Dental or The Dental Group. They do this so when one of their offices gets caught in a scandal, and that happens often, the whole company doesn't get affected. They take dentists that either just came out of dental school and don't have enough money to start their own office, or they're a dentist who has a bad reputation, so they relocate them into one of their offices. These dentists work on commission and bonuses, so we would get monthly numbers we would have to hit. So the biggest moneymaker in dentistry is crowns, because insurance pays us the most for them. So we would have to sometimes hit 100 crowns a month. It's rare that we actually saw that many patients that needed crowns. So let's say you needed a filling or you had an existing crown. The doctor would say instead of that $125 filling, that you needed a $1,500 crown. And if you had an existing crown, our doctors would say that there was decay under it. And if you had an existing crown, our doctors would say there was decay under it and it needed to be replaced. I heard corporate representatives urge our doctors to do this. One of the worst companies I've ever worked for. So we start with a medical scam, and as such we end with a medical scam. Upselling in dentistry is not something I thought I would have heard about, although this is technically worse than upselling, I think. I don't really know, but it definitely doesn't sound great. Convincing people to spend more money than they need to just so you can hit a monthly number, ugh. Also, a dentist who works on commission, if I found out my dentist worked on commission, I would never go there again. I don't think any medical worker should be working on a numbers-based pay system. That sounds like a very, very bad time for all involved. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something from these insider secrets. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next one.